killing the right people July 4th. The trouble with modern war is that it gives no one a chance to kill the right people. Ezra Pound. On the morning of July 4th, as the sun rose in the mountains far to the east of the Oregon shore, a coastal defense patrol found something on Sunset Beach just south of Astoria. Lying on the sand at a 30-degree portside list, where it had been washed up onto the beach by the tide, was the wreck of a Kriegsmarine torpedo, assault craft, TC-109. Its nylon tricolor naval ensign on the stern yard blowing and crackling in the wind. The rear deck had been blown open where the methane fuel tank had ruptured. The twin 50-caliber machine guns drooped downward, and the whole superstructure was riddled with holes from chain guns, 20mm guns, and general automatic weapons fire sustained during the Battle of the Columbia Bar 2 weeks before. The vessel had been drifting for all that time, and amazingly had stayed afloat until it reached land. There was no sign of the tack boat's crew, although the rubber life raft and emergency gear were gone. No trace of Lieutenant Ken Rogers, mate Holger Stromberg, or able seamen Ralph Hornaday and James McAdams was ever found. In this case, the sea chose not to give up its dead. The patrol was joined by some local people from Seaside and Astoria. After ascertaining that there were no signs of life on board, they got a large tow truck and with steel cables, a winch, and a lot of muscle. They dragged the shattered vessel up higher onto the beach, about 200 yards from a larger, rusting hulk. This was the wreck of the former Catalina Island car ferry SS Ventura, which had remained where it ran aground in the Battle of Sunset Beach many years before, during the War of Independence. The federal anti-terrorist police organization FATPO had attempted a seaborne invasion of Clatsop County, Oregon, with a view to surprising Zach Hatfield's 3rd Battalion of the NVA Portland Brigade, as it was then designated. The Federals had been met by the NVA on the beach and bloodily repulsed. The burned-out remains of the Ventura had been left on the beach. Later on, after some consideration, the Republic decided to leave the shot-up wreck of TAC 109 there as well, mounted on a bed of concrete to make sure it didn't wash away in a winter storm. To this, they added the originally scuttled and sunken but later salvaged wreck of the motor launch Nancy, which during the War of Independence had been converted to a crude torpedo boat and used during the NVA's assault on the original aircraft carrier John F. Kennedy, docked at Bremerton. This strip of coastline is today the Sunset Beach National Monument and the Republic's official Naval War Memorial, with a museum attached a little ways inland. The site attracts tens of thousands of tourists each year. Every June 30th, on the anniversary of the abortive FATPO invasion, the graduating class of the Naval Academy takes their final oath of allegiance to the Republic on the sand in front of the 3 burned and bullet-scarred wrecks on the beach. Toward dawn, Bob Campbell briefly fell asleep in his chair in the Renwick Gallery garret, but he awoke about 6:30 to the sound of sirens and the sight of unusual vehicular activity on the White House grounds, or what he could see of them from his restricted vantage point. With his binoculars, he spotted at least one ambulance and a whole line of official black government limousines and law enforcement SUVs with red and blue LED lights flashing, entering the grounds via the wrought iron gates on Executive Avenue. The sun was not yet up, but the sky was dull and brassy, and it promised fair to be another steam bath of an East Coast summer's day. Something must have gone wrong, Bob thought in alarm. He flipped open his phone and checked CNN, but there was no breaking news, just the usual reruns of talking heads from the night before, experts in suits and retired generals going on about how the gallant American champions of freedom and democracy were holding strong and destroying the evil forces of racist Northwest tyranny through a brilliant strategy of defense in depth, which was the official terminology for being surrounded by the NDF. Bob surveyed the scene out the window again. He couldn't see enough of the White House through the intervening trees and concrete to figure out what was going on, and decided he had to risk a clear call to Cardinale, although he would be very circumscribed in the language he would be able to use. Bob opened his phone, dialed, heard Vinnie Skin's answer, and ad-libbed in his Chicago Richie persona. "Hey boss, it's me. That pickup for this morning is looking a little shaky. Looks like our guy was partying all night or something. Anyway, his crib is really jumping with some pretty dubious characters, know what I mean? I don't know where the merchandise is or what kind of shape it's in. I do, unfortunately, said Cardinale, opening the door of the small storeroom and stepping inside, phone in hand. Betsy came in after him. She was dressed for travel in jeans, runners, and a blue denim blouse. Bob jumped up. What's happening? Guess who got woken up this morning by the Secret Service to make an emergency house call at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, said Betsy. Our own zombie master. They sent a limo for him. Seems the main man himself was losing his marbles, just like Belladonna said. What? Exclaimed Bob. You're shitting me. Nope, nary turd one, said Cardinale. The zombie master's over there now, inside the building. They've locked him down in the kitchen. Not just him, but the rest of the staff as well, apparently. While the politicals figure out what to do with this incredible mess they're going to have to spin to the public for the 4th of July. What the hell is going on? Asked Bob. Do you know? Yeah, kind of, replied Vinny. Doc Shapira and I have a little more advanced verbal code than we had time to teach you, and sometimes we can conduct an almost open phone conversation for short periods of time. On certain subjects, anyway. Is George all right? Demanded Bob. Cardinale looked at him. Son, there's no easy way to tell you this, so I'm just going to spit it out. She's dead. So is the President of the United States. Our beautiful lady lived up to her other name as well. She turned out to be deadly. She killed the President, and the Secret Service killed her. Bob felt the floor move beneath him, and he collapsed back into the chair. Mother of God, he moaned. How the hell did that happen? She wasn't supposed to kill him. That wasn't the plan. I don't get it. I would have sworn she didn't have it in her, that Georgia was never dangerous to anybody but herself. Everybody has it in them, said Betsy. How? How did she do it? What in God's name went wrong? You remember you passed on that last message of hers about 6 this morning, right? Said Cardinale. The one where she said we'd broke his brain? It looks like she was speaking literally. Hunter Wallace flipped his lid. That's why they called Doc over, to try and give the presidential noggin a quick tune-up, but Shapira never even got to see him. Without his 2 Jewish advisors, Wallace went into kosher withdrawal or whatever the fuck happens to Shabazz Goyim who can't get their daily kike fix. He got hold of the nuclear codes, and he was about to launch a full nuclear missile strike against the Northwest Republic. Somehow, Our Lady got to him and stopped him. She stabbed him with a letter opener or something, as near as Doc can figure, and then the bodyguards gunned her down. Hugh Jenner is now president, and apparently he has called off the nuclear attack on the Republic. She did it, said Bob in a dull voice. She saved us. She did, said Cardinale grimly. This is bad news, Rich, the worst news possible, but I'm going to need you focused with your head in the game now. That young woman literally saved our country from being fried into a cinder. We made her a promise we can't keep now. At least not half of it, but by God, son, we're going to keep the other half. I need you and Betsy to go and extract the little girl from that palace of filth on K Street and do the holy ande just like we planned, only just with the child, not the mother. Capiche? Yes, sir, said Campbell, standing up, his heart like lead inside him. What about you? Duke and I will pick up the doc as soon as he can get clear of the White House, Cardinale told him. We have something we need to take care of. We had a contingency plan if Operation Belladonna went south. The pissed-off mood I'm in right now, I say fuck it, let's see if we can go for the record. 2 presidents in one day. Never mind that. You and that little girl need to be long out of the city by then. After today, I'm shutting the whole Vinny Skins operation down, and we're all going to ground until we can figure out how bad the heat is going to get. They're going to tear Georgia's life apart second by every second she was in the White House. Eventually, they'll find you, and they'll make the connection with that dead Secret Serviceman Duke Dearjond in the alley. Then it all starts to unravel. We've got a procedure in place whereby we all go completely under and keep on fighting. If it comes down to it, we have some packages stashed away to deliver in the Washington, D.C. area that will pretty much bring this whole sick toilet of a city to a stop. I really hope we get those orders. Now you and Betsy need to get rolling. The Halberstam residence is going to be crawling with wall-to-wall goons once they catch their breath and start the wheels of investigation and retaliation going. Got it, sir, said Campbell. If all goes well, we won't be seeing each other again, said Cardinale, sticking out his hand. It's been a pleasure, kid. Sorry about the result, but there's never any guarantees. "It's been a privilege for me, sir," said Campbell, shaking his hand. "The result was the one we wanted. It's just the price was higher than we thought." He nodded to Betsy. "Let's go." Carnell was right. The Secret Service was already on the move, beginning the official investigation into the late president's death. Bob and Betsy were lucky there were only 2 agents on the doorstep when they arrived at the sumptuous K Street brownstone of Marvin and Amber Halberstam. It was still very early in the morning, not even 7 a.m. 2 suited agents, 1 black male and 1 woman who was some kind of off-coffee color, were standing in the portico arguing with a small dark-skinned woman in a gray dress and apron. This was either a maid or Allura's nanny. The Federals were apparently demanding entry. The cafe au lait female in her power woman suit was arguing with the maid or nanny in Tagalog. Bob checked them out over the neatly manicured hedge. "We'd better move fast. There will probably be more of them along to search the house any minute now." Bob and Betsy took the direct approach. They marched up the flagstoned walk, and as the 2 Secret Service agents turned, they both raised their silenced weapons in unison, and each of them drilled one of the goons through the head. The gun spat, and the feds collapsed onto the portico in an Armani heap. The brown woman disappeared into the house screaming, and they followed her, stepping over the corpses. "Substairs nursery," he yelled to Betsy, "and I'll clear the downstairs." She leaped up the stairs 3 at a time. Bob slipped through the luxurious and plushly carpeted downstairs rooms, his gun at the ready. He found Amber Halberstam sprawled on an antique brocade sofa in the den, richly dressed in an evening gown and almost comatose. Apparently, she had been out all night at some kind of formal function and never bothered to go to bed once she staggered in. Bob was shocked at the way Amber had deteriorated from her days in Montana. He remembered a vigorous if obnoxious woman in her prime, healthy and strapping in a hairy-legged Earth Mother kind of way. The creature dripping off the couch in front of him was a desiccated hag with hollow, haunted eyes, blue varicose veins in her legs and quivering, wrinkled hands. "My God, after only 12 years at the top of the shit heap," he thought to himself. "I guess the liberal life takes its toll." Amber stared up at him blearily, no recognition in her eyes. It was obvious that she was either stoned out of her mind, blind drunk, or both. A priceless 100-year-old Waterford crystal decanter stood on the side table at the end of the sofa, almost empty of some golden liquid, either whiskey or brandy, and a smeared empty highball glass sat next to it. "Good morning, Mrs. Myers," he said. "I don't suppose you would remember me, but I used to hang around at your house a lot with your son Kevin. I'm Bobby Campbell from back in Missoula." "Bobby," she burbled, screwing up her eyes and her forehead, trying to remember. "Oh yeah, Bobby Campbell from down the street. Jenny's brother. She was a fucking racist murderer. No, you can't be here." "Is your husband at home this morning?" he asked politely. "Marvin's spending the night with his girlfriend," said Amber. "And we got a kind of open marriage, you know. Real fucking civilized." "Of course you do. You can't be here," she said, struggling to sit up as it finally percolated into her pickled brain that no way should that little racist, hooligan Bobby Campbell from Missoula be here in her house on K Street, and something was going on. "I promised Georgia I wouldn't hurt you," said Bob. "I lied." He shot her once dead center between her sagging breasts, leaned over and forced the silencer between her teeth, and blew the back of her head off, splattering the exquisite Louis Quincy wallpaper behind the sofa with blood and brains and skull fragments. Betsy appeared in the doorway. In her arms, she held a small, blue-eyed blonde girl about 14 months of age, wearing only a disposable diaper and clasping an old-fashioned Raggedy Ann doll. She had a pacifier in her mouth and stared around at the world, taking it all in but not crying or afraid. "The nanny?" asked Bob. Betsy drew her finger across her throat with a "We need to roll, Richie. I'll get her dressed in the car." With George's help, they had long ago put together a travel bag for Allura in case of sudden need. It included several suits of clothes, more diapers and changing gear, bottles and baby food, a few toys, and so on. The back of Bob's car had also been fitted with a child seat. As they left the house, stepping over the 2 Secret Service corpses again, Bob looked up and saw the closed-circuit television camera hanging on its bracket over the door. "Damn," he cursed. "Now they've got us on video downtown, coming and going." "Shit happens," said Betsy. On the way out of town, Betsy rode in the back seat, dressing Allura in a light cotton pantsuit and strapping her into the child seat. The child simply sucked on the pacifier, hugged her Raggedy Ann, and stared out the window watching things go by, barely making a sound beyond occasional squeaks and gurbles. Bob didn't dare try to get back into Virginia over any of the bridges, in view of the virtually certain code-red security alert the city was on, even though the assassination of Hunter Wallace hadn't been publicly announced yet. The bridges wouldn't be shut down, since that would screw up the whole grid beyond measure and make search and control in a city paralyzed by traffic jams infinitely harder for the authorities. But on that stage of alert, every license number and FLEC ID and VIN number of every person and vehicle leaving the district would be automatically run through the DHS computer network, and he couldn't risk anything tripping an alarm somewhere in the system. For all he knew, they now had an alert out for the car. Bob got onto Canal Road and drove westward, through Georgetown, and then onto the Clara Barton Parkway. He was going to have to risk going through one of the many unauthorized entrances and exits to the ESMA used by bootleggers, beefleggers, and other criminals or individuals who, for whatever reason, did not find it convenient to go through an established checkpoint with its surveillance gear and database cross-referencing. Bob got off Clara Barton at Manning Road and slid through the streets running parallel to MacArthur Road until he came to Capitol Crescent Trail. He pulled over into a filling station right by the border wall that sold expensive gasoline as well as ethanol and charge-ups for electric vehicles. The day manager was a customer of his who had a sideline. "Hey, Joey," said Richie. "Hey, Rich," said the pump jockey, a middle-aged man with several days' stubble and the lean build of the true tobacco addict. "Wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." Joey ran through 3 cartons of Chinese Camel knockoffs a week. "Actually, I need a favor, Joe," said Richie. "I need to get over to Bethesda real quick to do some business, and I don't have time to fight the traffic at the checkpoints. I was hoping you'd put your magic finger on your magic button and let me slip out the back." This was pure bullshit. The only thing in Bethesda was violent niggers. Joey looked in the back and saw Betsy and the child. "You sure about that, Rich?" he asked. "And the sun may be up here, but Maryland is still kind of dark this time of day." Joey wasn't just being coy or silly. Long practice with living under draconian hate speech laws made white Americans reflexively fall back on code words and circumlocutions any time a conversation even came within shouting distance of race. It was a survival mechanism. Between the FBI and the unofficial Brotherhood volunteers who sniffed out racial dissidents for the FBI and DHS, mostly white women married to black and third world men, no one ever knew who was wired or when a casual remark would mean a nickel in one of the penal factories, mines, or oil refineries along the hellish American Texas coast. The factories were hungry for labor. America's black and brown minorities were now too privileged to work with their hands or their backs much, so every year the hate laws got worse. Business is business. "What can I tell you?" said Richie Bob, leaning his hand on the open window frame of the car, a couple of $1,000 bills grasped loosely between his fingers. Joey looked at the money and made it disappear. "Well, if you're sure you know what you're doing, drive on around." Bob swung the car around back of the filling station. A minute later, a concealed electric engine groaned, and a section of the corrugated steel security wall began to move aside. Bob drove through the wall into Maryland. The illegal gate rumbled closed behind him. Black Maryland was as bad as Bob had been told. The streets were piled high with ancient garbage and cratered with potholes that forced him to drive slowly, dangerously slowly, because it meant that niggers on foot could get at them. None of the traffic lights worked. Driving through the streets of Bethesda was like threading an obstacle course. Bob had to avoid the huge holes in the asphalt, since a breakdown or broken axle pretty clearly meant death. Fortunately for them, it was still very early in the morning, and few of the local denizens were out and about. Bob could see groups of black figures loping through the alleys and the intersections, some apparently foraging, eyeing the car sullenly, with hate in their eyes and snarls on their thick bubble lips. Several times sniper shots whined in and cracked the bulletproof glass on the windshield and the rear window. They were finally attacked in Silver Spring by a mob of about 30 blacks of all ages and sexes who swarmed out of nearby alleys and overran the car as Bob slowed to avoid a pothole the size of a tank trap. They hammered on the car with clubs and lumps of concrete and started rocking it, trying to overturn it. Betsy cracked a window and fired out, killing several of the animals. The rest ran away. In Rockville, they ran into a crude barricade made of old furniture and boxes manned, if that was the word, by shaven-headed monkoids, presumably some local gang. Bob smashed through the roadblock and drove on. They eventually made it out into the wasted countryside, green with summer but eerily deserted now. They drove past fire-gutted houses and old strip malls, mostly rubble now, that stood silently in the muggy heat and whirring crickets. Frederick was a fortified white enclave with police blockhouses at key intersections and points along the road. From there, Bob was able to get up onto Interstate 70, which was passably maintained and drivable, so they made better time. Around 2, they halted at a truck stop in Hagerstown, surrounded by Bremer walls and barbed wire, guarded by armed white men wearing some kind of private security uniforms. They were able to get some food and gas, albeit at exorbitant prices charged by the Hindus who ran the place. Bob glanced at the TV over the bar in the restaurant. Apparently, there still had been no official announcement that the President of the United States was dead, and the regime's hold over the state-controlled media was still sufficiently powerful to stifle even rumors. At Hagerstown, Betsy changed Allura, fed her a jar of strained plums, made her a bottle of juice, and secured the little girl in her seat. She had cried a couple of times on the way up, but now she fell peacefully asleep in the child's seat, clutching the bottle and the Raggedy Ann, one in each hand. Betsy was now riding in the front as they headed down 80 to Martinsburg, West Virginia. "Hey, you know you're compromised now," Bob told her, "when he surely recorded us on the cameras whacking those 2 federals." "Yeah, well, I was getting tired of D.C. anyway," said Betsy with a shrug. "The office will find me a new gig, maybe New York or Chicago or American Houston." "I've got a better idea," said Bob. "We're not out of the woods yet, and that little girl is going to need caring for by someone while I do the driving and take care of all the details of getting us home. It's a two-man job. Why not come all the way home with the both of us, Bets? I gather you're not actually in the WPB, you're a civilian employee, so to speak, so you're not under military discipline, and you can take some time off. You've been fighting for the Republic all your life, comrade. Why not come home and see what you've been fighting for? You've earned it." "Not the way it works," replied Betsy. "I don't get happy endings." "Never know until you try," said Bob. "I guess somebody told you about me," said Betsy without rancor. "If they told it right, then you know I have nothing to go back to." "Nothing from your past, no," agreed Bob. "But you've got the rest of your life to go to. Look, I won't push it, but the party and the NVA made the Northwest Republic so white people wouldn't have to live in this kind of shit all their lives. Never again. That includes you. I get it if you don't want to go back to Washington, but my part of Montana is pretty cool. Just think about it, okay?" "Okay, I will," said Betsy. She pulled out her phone and turned up CNN. "I guess Hugh Jenner's going to be making that 4th of July speech instead of the late President Wallace," she said. "It's set for 2 p.m. I'll turn it up so you can hear it. This should be interesting," chuckled Bob. "Oh yeah," said Betsy with a giggle. "It will go over with a bang." At that moment, Vinnie Skins and Duke were pulling a medium-sized flatbed truck loaded with what appeared to be 6 lengths of 14-inch black iron pipe lying side by side into an alley behind the cafe. Soleil, just off 17th Street. Duke parked very carefully, right on a red line that had been spray-painted across the alleyway the night before. "I sure hope Bertie's computer knows what the hell it's doing," said Duke. "I know he vows and swears this is the right firing position and the right range, but this thing has no sighting on it besides the hoist. How the hell do we know where the hell these rounds are going to hit?" "That's half the fun," said Cardinale with a laugh. "You never popped the top on one of these babies back in the day, but I did 4 or 5 times. There just isn't any way to make them pinpoint accurate, hence the 6 barrels. But believe me, even if we don't catch Jenner, we will definitely steal his thunder as he announces to a bereaved nation the death of their beloved leader. God, I hope the camera shows his face when the roof caves in on his ass. If we even manage to hit the roof of the White House," said Duke pessimistically. "Hey, if not, maybe we'll overshoot and bring down the Washington Monument," said Cardinale in a jovial voice. "Got your E&E memorized?" "Sure," said Duke. After we pop the top, I leg it over past Farragut Square to the metro station where Trisha picks me up. You head for your rendezvous with Junebug at Burrito Brothers. Needless to say, if Birdie can't pull down the cameras, we're both going to have pretty short trips. Even if he can't, we fire anyway, said Cardinale firmly. If that happens, we abort the pickups and we bop our way out as best we can. Our chances won't be good, but at least we won't take Trisha and Junebug down with us. Roger that, sir, replied Fitzpatrick. If I don't make it and you do, Duke, you're in charge, Cardinale reminded him. You know the order codes for the phosgene and the anthrax. Can you pop the top on them if you're ordered to do so? Me get a chance to clean out this cesspool once and for all? Duke responded. No problem at all, sir. Inside the Oval Office, the acting president Hugh Jenner was seated behind the famous desk with the rose garden visible through the French windows behind him, the setting for so many famous presidential addresses in the past. Hunter Wallace's blood and bodily fluids had been scoured from the floor, and the well-known carpet with the presidential seal had been removed for cleaning. The whole room still smelled of disinfectant. The White House media staff were busily setting up the camera and the teleprompter in front of the desk for him when Agent Lee Lyons came into the room. Guys, could you give us a minute? He asked the technicians. After they left, he said, Mr. President, I can confirm the 2 agents killed at the Halberstam home, as well as Mrs. Halberstam, the mother, and a Filipino nanny. Illegal, of course, not that that matters much anymore, since the effective suspension of all immigration law in this country a generation ago. All the decedents were shot to death with 9mm rounds. Allura Halberstam is missing and has been kidnapped by the 2 assailants captured on the security cams, who were recorded leaving and carrying the child with them. These have both been identified from the video footage from their FLEC cards using facial recognition software. Oddly enough, this doesn't seem to be spies, it looks like a mob thing. One of the gunners is named Richard Carroll, a low-level soldier in Vincent Cardinale's butt and beef-legging crew over in Arlington. A lot of White House staff use Vinnie skins, and so there may be all kinds of connections there. The other one is Elizabeth Paris, a registered sex trade worker, and also a street captain for Cardinale. The Nazis are hiring the mob to do their dirty work now? Asked Jenner, puzzled. That doesn't sound like them. I thought they were a lot more professional than that. Maybe Carroll and Paris were subcontracting for somebody in the circus, suggested Lyons. Well, something weird is going on here, said Jenner. I'm running enhanced checks on Carroll and Paris, said Lyons. We know the WPB has the capability of creating synthetics, people with fully verifiable cyber IDs. They break into our databases like they were high school lockers and put whatever crap they want in there. Lyons leaned over the desk and lowered his voice. Sir, I have to ask, this morning, did you know she would do it when you let her into this office? No, of course not, said Jenner, shaking his head emphatically. I hoped that she would dissuade the president through persuasion on a personal or, yes, possibly sexual level. That's your story and you're sticking to it, said Lyons dryly. You're saying it never occurred to you that anyone Northwest intelligence was able to infiltrate this close to the center of government would very likely be not only a highly trained professional assassin quite capable of killing with anything that came to hand, but a Nazi fanatic perfectly willing to give up her own life in order to carry out her mission. I do not recall any thoughts of the kind crossing my mind, no, said Jenner. And yes, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. May I suggest, Lee, that in view of the fact that we are in the middle of a severe national crisis, not to mention the fact that your career is on the line even more so than mine, we agree to pull together on this one and put together a narrative that makes some kind of sense, or can at least be spun to look like it makes sense. As deep in the shit as we find ourselves this afternoon, at least there are no mushroom clouds going up over Vancouver or poisoning American cities. Now we have a martyred president whom we can get almost endless mileage out of, if we play this right. I see no need for posterity ever to know that he was as crazy as a fucking loon. And will the Northmen play along with your spin, sir? Asked Lyons skeptically. I don't know, said Jenner. That's one reason we need to start talking to them. He pulled out a piece of paper from the desk. I sent this to the Russian embassy earlier, on the assumption that the Ruskies are keeping in touch with their clients in the Northwest and that they would have some way to email or fax it to Ray Ridgway in Olympia. He's their finance minister now in the NAR, and he's an old acquaintance of mine from Portland. Well, an old enemy, if you want to know the truth. Before the trouble, we spent most of our time trying to ruin each other, bankrupt each other, hijack one another's companies through hostile takeovers, seduce each other's wives, that kind of yuppie crap. Why, sir? Asked Lyons. What was the beef? Mostly just boredom, the kind of bored you get when you've got all the money you'll ever need and all the good things in life money can buy, so you just stir shit for the hell of it, recalled Jenner with a sigh. This ought to get him. I signify my willingness to eat crow, and if he makes it personal, maybe I can get those troops out of there alive so we'll have some intact military left. And then we can start with the delays and the soft soap and get some kind of livable armistice. Until next time. Lyons looked at the message. Dear Ray, Hunter Wallace is dead, which I assume you know because your people sent the assassin. I'm president now, and I want to open negotiations to end this. I'm hollering Uncle Ray. I'm offering an immediate ceasefire and immediate withdrawal. You did it. You finally beat me, beat us. Savor your victory and let's stop the dying. I'll meet with your man Morehouse where and when you say. Before Lyons could comment, he got a buzz on his phone, which he answered. The Chief Justice is here, he told Jenner. The plan was to have the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court administer the oath of office to Jenner on nationwide television. Great, said the soon-to-be president. I'll want a few words with him before airtime, and we need to get the cabinet in as well. Lee, we'll talk about this more later on, but right at the moment we are deep in a hole, and it's time we stop digging. Out in the truck behind the Café Soleil, it was getting as hot as an oven in the 100-degree July heat. Cardinale turned on the engine and the air conditioning in the cab. We're going to need the engine to raise the mortar tubes, he said. Might as well cool off a bit while we wait. Duke was monitoring CNN on his phone. Here it comes, he said. Holy Christ, look at this. He showed the small screen to Cardinale, pointing. It looks like they've got the entire cabinet standing behind him. Show of solidarity with the new leader, that kind of crap, said Cardinale. I'll bet at least half of them think Jenner whacked Hunter Wallace himself, for his own ambition. There's that bull-dyke Chalupiak, who wanted to nuke us just as much as those two Jews did, and I think that's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court standing to Jenner's right there, said Duke. Oh yeah, he'll be there to swear the new guy in, said Cardinale. Taking that fat jackass out will be almost as much of a plus as cacking Jenner and Chalupiak. Cardinale picked up his phone and sent an encrypted text to Bertie, who had been relocated out of his ancestral home and was now ensconced in a WPB safe house in McLean, Virginia, with his most essential equipment he'd brought with him from the old place. The text read, Everything set here. Go. Bird began tapping out a series of computer commands bounced off 100 different proxy servers and bogus IP addresses. Taking down the entire District of Columbia ESMA system at once was the most complicated hack he had ever attempted, and it would take a little bit of time. Jenner sat behind the desk wearing a neat suit with a black mourning armband. He intended to look solemn and dignified. Instead, he looked like a combination between Ichabod Crane and a basset hound. The acting president began his speech. My fellow Americans, I'm afraid that on this anniversary of our country's birth, an occasion which should be one of pride and celebration for all Americans, I must come to you with sad and shocking news. The first thing that you will notice is that I am not the man who was scheduled to make this address. The man who should be here speaking to you this afternoon is President Hunter Wallace, and he should be delivering to a waiting world the joyful and historic news that our country has once more been reunified, and the demons of racism, anti-Semitism, sexism, homophobia, and hatred have been banished from our land for all time. But this cannot be. This morning, in this very historic Oval Office from which I now speak, Hunter Wallace, a great American and a great president under whom I was proud to serve, was... Cardinale's phone bleeped and he held it up. Okay, that's Bertie. Every street cam in the city just went down. Time to rock and roll. He leaned over and pulled a lever in the cab, a heavy electric motor. Hummed and whirred, and the flatbed of the truck began to lift up from the chassis, raising the 6 lengthy iron pipes to a preset angle. Cardinale reached under his seat and turned on a timed detonator device. Okay, we need to unass this vehicle now. When those mortars hit 48 degrees, the firing sequence will start, and then we've got about 30 seconds to get out of Dodge, because when they fire, the whole truck will be demolished. Good thing nobody's around, said Duke as they moved swiftly down the alleyway, which was deserted in the baking heat. They must all be inside watching the speech on TV. Good, chuckled Vinny Skins. They'll get a fucking eyeful. How long after the mortars fire before the rounds hit? Asked Duke. Maybe 20 seconds, which is a bit of a weak link in the plan, I know, admitted Cardinale. 20 seconds in the air is enough for somebody with some cop on over there to hear the blast, figure out what's going on, and react. Thing is that you're dealing with physics and gravity, and those can't be tweaked. They may hear the truck blow and they may even realize what the fuck it is, if they've got anybody over there who remembers the old days in Tacoma and Spokane, but once they're fired they can't stop those bombs. What goes up must come down. Let's just hope that out of 6 shells loaded with super sem and white phosphorus, we can ram at least one of them up Hugh Jenner's ass. Secret Service sake Lee Lyons was a former fatpo, and he did indeed remember the old days in Tacoma and Spokane. He heard the low boom as the truck went up. So did everyone in the Oval Office. But the explosion sounded far away, and as old political troopers, the cabinet, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court maintained their poker faces as they stood around the desk in the Oval Office in a show of solidarity with the new leader of the free world. Lyons spoke into his earphone, "Mike, MC Man, where was that explosion? It sounded too close for comfort." "A couple of blocks to the north, sir," said MC Man. Suddenly Lyons remembered, hearing a similar hollow detonation off in the distance, many years before, and what had happened moments later in the terrorism center in Spokane City Hall. He did not hesitate. He charged into the Oval Office just as Acting President Jenner was saying, "We have attempted to contact the fascist regime in the Northwest with a view towards saving human lives, but apparently they are not interested in sparing their own so-called country and their own captive population the horrors of war, for we have not yet received their reply." "GET down," roared Lyons, leaping up onto the desk, grabbing Jenner by the lapels and throwing him down onto the now carpetless floor, covering Jenner's body with his own. Then the United States received the fascists' reply. Television viewers saw a flash of light as one of the mortar shells landed and detonated in the Rose Garden, a brief blur of falling walls and masonry, and then the transmission was cut off. At midnight that night, it was announced that rescue teams had finally succeeded in pulling Acting President Hugh Jenner out of the rubble, alive and amazingly unharmed except for a broken arm and a broken bone in his right foot. He had lain on his stomach for hours, covered by the dead body of Agent Lee Lyons, feeling Lyons' blood and fluids oozing all over him. In addition to Lyons, the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, the entire cabinet, and numerous White House staff and journalists were dead. The 6 mortar shells had crashed down into the Rose Garden and onto the roof, largely demolished and set fire to the West Wing, and left the historic residence at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue with almost half the famous frontage in rubble. The walls of the West Wing that remained standing were leaning crazily. If a building could look like it was on the losing end of a bar fight, the White House did. Hugh Jenner was nothing if not a political showman. The next morning, the news channels showed him lying in his hospital bed being sworn in as President of the United States by a mere associate justice, reassuring the nation that truth, justice, and the American way would triumph, and closing with an emotional meeting with the widow and small son of the heroic Agent Lee Lyons, the man whose death had saved his life, and also removed a possible source of uncomfortable knowledge, and questions about whether or not he deliberately introduced Georgia Myers into the Oval Office, in the hope or knowledge that she might. CAC, his predecessor. The official government version of Wallace's death was highly sanitized, of course, but enough of the facts eventually came out so that historians would debate for decades afterward the true course of events and Jenner's true motives. He never enlightened them and took his secret, if any, to the grave with him. After the camera crews had packed up and left, Admiral Hector Brava came in. Jenner handed him a piece of paper. "This came in about an hour ago," he said. "Ray Ridgway's reply?" asked Brava, dreading to read it. "Maybe. It's from the Northmen anyway." "This arrived as an email on my personal phone," said Jenner, his lips compressed. "The one I use only for my family. No official business at all, never, and nobody knows that those 4 phones even exist at all. But this came to me. I heard it beep in my pocket while I was lying there in the dark with Lee Lyons lying dead on top of me. The phone in my pocket kept ringing and ringing all that time, driving me fucking out of my mind until I forgot about the pain and the fear. I just wanted that damned phone to stop ringing. This was the call. I printed it out." On the paper was a beautiful color photo of a Northwest tricolor flag, with Oregon's famous Mount Hood in the background, under a pristine blue sky. Beneath the flag were 3 words, "Our turn now."